Hey everybody, kind of happy Wednesday, I guess. So I was requested, somebody requested with me earlier this week to talk about like tights and whatnot, and I figured it's probably a good time to kind of go into all of compression gear that you might be wearing, like under a singlet or in exchange for a singlet, something along those lines. So kind of going into it. A lot of this is going to be really redundant to what I said about singlets. So if you guys want to do more thorough going through things, then that would be a good video to go back to. So, the market for tights and compression gear, guys, is so vastly large that I don't think that I could actually really do as great of a job as I did with the singlet video, and especially since, brand-wise, I don't have a lot to say. So I want to go ahead and kind of focus more on design aspects rather than, brands or anything like that. So things that kind of are important to me when I'm looking at compression gear. So looking at tights, this is Under Armour. This is one of their more standard ones. And the first thing I'm going to go ahead and say is, for one, you can't get this anymore because it's a nylon lycra rather than a polyester lycra, which is where everybody's kind of shifting to. Nylon lycra, as I said in the singlet video, it's got more spring to it than the something like this, where it's the polyester lycra, which is just going to feel lighter on your body, which is probably good on a on the standpoint of, you're going to feel cooler in it, you're not going to have as much squeeze on your body. But the thing I want to point out about that is, for one, if I were to bring out, I guess, these right here, if you guys can see right here, on the polyester versions, you'll see that the stitching rips out a whole lot easier than it did in the nylon versions. These tights are, these ones are way older than these ones, and you can see already that things are popping out and they're getting nasty pretty quickly. Versus on a nylon, the stitching tends to hold a lot better. That being said, when we're looking at stitching specifically, again, this, if I open up the top here, you see that there's no ridge on the inside. This is flat on both sides. The stitch actually looks identical on the inside or out. That's going to be a better stitch than, say, the one that's inside here, where you've got kind of more of a serger stitch, where it is this big ridge that goes along here. This can cause a little bit more itching. It's better than some other options that you might have, but this is actually going to be more irritating to the skin. That being said, I do find that sometimes on the cheaper versions of these, this style of stitch, the cover stitch, will actually pop more often than this does. So, generally speaking, like, the problem that happens with these types of stitches is that there's usually a thread that goes in a straight line, and what happens with that is that hopefully they've used, like, maybe a woolly nylon or something else along those lines, an elastic style of threading that will stretch with the material. And when you start seeing that popping, it's usually because they're using a non-stretch type of stitching, and it's usually those straight lines are ones that are going to be popping. So basically what happens here is that the thread that you see going back and forth, it literally is going back and forth, and so when you straighten it out, it becomes more of a straight line, right, when it stretches, and therefore it doesn't pop or break. But the ones that go straight, those are the ones that you really want to make sure. And so if you're testing these in the store, if you can give it a little pull and it starts to pop open, you're damaging it, but it's also going to damage probably the first time you put it on. And I find that that's going to be a lot more common with a polyester blend than a nylon blend. So that's kind of the first point I want to point out, is that you're going to have a longer lasting, springier material if you go with the nylon. On a care note, generally speaking, when you clean any type of spandex, you really shouldn't put it in the dryer. You should actually just wash it and then hang dry it. The reason for that is that the nylon is a plastic. When it gets hot, it's going to start to contract, and it'll start breaking itself down, and you'll start getting patches. And I didn't bring any of my older stuff here. I guess it's one of my older shirts here, but it doesn't really have it happening yet, where it starts looking worn, and it starts having more of a matte finish and little patches here and there, where you can actually see that the nylon has started to break down. So when we're looking at any type of compression gear, we want to be paying attention to the material, we want to know how to take care of the material, and we want to be looking at the type of stitching that we're looking at here. So the next thing is a design thing for me, and it's a pretty big deal for me. So you see here, this is the front of the crotch. It's inside out, but because it's white stitching, you can see what's going on here, is that we actually have a gusset here that goes over the crotch, and so the seams end up on either side of your junk. And so this is going to be a little bit less likely to force your junk down one side of one of your legs, and then it can kind of get pinched there. You can get kind of a mild testicular torsion from that, and it can be irritating and annoying, and you're more likely to get your balls crushed when you're rolling if you have something like these old guys that I pointed out already, where you have a seam right down the middle. So it's really, really hard to find ones that have the split front gusset there. So that's going to be something that you really, really want to look for when it comes to that. The same thing is going to be relatively true when it comes to the armpit area. So you see on this guy, this is a better shirt because you see that I've got kind of that baseball style where it kind of comes up like this, and then there's no seam that's on the thinnest part of my armpit here. So if you have something like this red shirt that I pulled out earlier where it's just a wraparound arm side on there, right? So the stitch goes all the way under the armpit. You're going to have more chafing and whatnot down here in the armpit area. So that's something to kind of look out for. So we want to be paying attention to where the seams are and whether or not they're going to be distracting to us. So the other thing that I want to point out, and I have it on a couple things, but this is for the Adidas, I think it's called the Alpha Skin, but they have this, the 3-stripe thing going on here, and these are relatively brand new, and you can probably see that pretty well there, where you can see that that's kind of coming off at this point. And what happens is that usually I get this type of thing. You see those stripes are actually sticking to themselves, and you kind of have to pull them apart, otherwise it's just going to sit funny on you. And when you pull them apart, that's when they kind of come apart. So that material is kind of sticky and it's not so great. And it's probably my biggest complaint about these. A lot of times when you have silk screening of that nature, you'll see what happens here on these Asics, where that silk screening is starting to crack. So silk screening is usually going to be done with some type of paint, and when the paint's not going to stretch, but the fabric's going to, and that's going to break apart that paint over the time, and then it's not going to look so great in the future. So that's something that's going to destroy the whatever compression gear you're wearing over time, and also it kind of rubs off. The difference here, and again, this goes back to the same things I was saying in the singlet review, which is that you have silk screening, which is going to pop, it's going to break, and it's going to look like shit over time, versus if it's a printed fabric. If they're actually printing on the fabric and you've got those types of graphics going on there, then those are going to last a whole lot longer. So going into other features here, this is actually a bike compression shirt, and it's got a zipper on it. We don't ever want to have zippers, especially if we're rolling with mats, but even in general, we don't have zippers on stuff that we are wrestling in, because that's something that people can get poked with, people can get cut on. You don't want to have somebody getting hurt in that way when we are rolling, right? We just want to do what we intended, and we don't want it poking holes in our mats. So we do not want to ever have something that has a zipper on it on the mats. The other thing here, this is also, I believe, another bike shirt. This is from Sub Sports, which have been a pretty nice high quality brand, but this I think is more of a bike shirt. I'm not sure. It's got this, just like the leg grippers that you have on wrestling singlets, it has one of those at the waist so that the shirt doesn't ride up as much. I think that would become irritating when I'm rolling, and I even find it a little bit irritating when I'm riding my bike or whatever. But this just is meant to stop the shirt from riding up, and it's not a feature that I would necessarily look for in a good quality compression gear that I would use for wrestling. But again, you can see that it's got the proper arm gusset here. It's a little bit different in style, but it's not as irritating as some other ones are. As far as going into talking about why we're wearing the compression gearing in the first place, and one of them is, it's not as much of a problem with my accordion mats, but for the more traditional school mats, mat burns are a very, very common annoyance that people go through. And so to have your skin covered is going to help you not get chafed when you're rolling. And that's the main reason why you do it. The second main reason is to create a barrier between your skin and the skin of your opponent, which so that you don't have as much staph transfer, or if somebody has ringworm, you're less likely to catch the ringworm. But you're going to get hotter when you're rolling a lot faster if you're wearing some kind of compression gear, and that can make you feel exhausted faster. It can make you get to the point where you feel nauseous faster. So we have to be mindful about that. The more that we're wearing, the more likely that we're going to overheat and have issues with that. So going over the brands that I do have here, again, I have Underarm here, I have Asics, Adidas, Subsports, and 2XU. Again, 2XU has that kind of grippy stuff. I haven't had issues with it sticking to itself the way that the Asics or the Adidas did. But I still I feel like that texture, that sticky texture suddenly is going to be distracting when I'm rolling. So it's not something I would want to have there. I also want to point out that the crotch gusset on this guy is maybe 2 inches wide, and so basically you're going to have a seam on each testicle when you're rolling, and that's probably going to end up distracting. But it's better than having just a straight line down the front. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend these for rolling. The Subsports ones, they are a little bit better. So you got about a 3.5 inch gusset here. And these are good quality nylon as well, for both of the ones that I have here. The ones I'm wearing, these are Nikes, and it's not printed. This is actually a textile pattern that creates the texture on this one. I like these. The crotch gusset is wide enough. There is a seam right here that goes right where your scrotum is. But I don't have a problem. I use these for class sometimes, and I roll in them, and they're just fine. But again, since this is a little bit of lighter weight material, I've already got seam poppage all the way up along here, so I would still say that your nylon lycra is going to be better. So the big narrative when it comes to compression gear is that it's going to increase your endurance, it's going to reduce muscle vibration, it's going to increase performance, it's going to increase circulation and all that. And I want to point out that there is no study as of now that, and they have run the studies, it's not that they haven't tried, that actually confirms any of that. As far as performance enhancement goes when it comes to compression gear, it's more of a recovery thing than it is a in-the-moment performance increase. So there's nothing that suggests that there's any significant performance increase by having something that squeezes your body, and there's nothing to suggest that it actually improves circulation. I will go back here in a second to discuss about where it does help with circulation, but for the most part, it doesn't, especially if it's a compression short or something like that. It has to be a full length deal that probably actually covers your feet as well in order for you to actually see a circulation benefit to that. And so the thing is that as you get older, you have valves in your veins that are trying to return blood to your heart, and those valves, stop blood from backflowing, right? And so if it backflows, then you're going to have CO2 buildup in that blood, and it's going to cause acidity and fatigue in the areas where that blood is pooling and not making it all the way back up. So over the years, those valves start to deteriorate away, and then you don't close all the way. So using compression gear pushes what's left of those valves closer to each other so that they can actually close all the way and get blood to go all the way back up to the heart. So with that being said, if you are even up to 50 years old, that's probably when you're going to start seeing, okay, you need to start using compression gear to actually improve your circulation. But generally speaking, for a normal person that's probably 50 and below, you're probably not going to need to be using compression gear to actually help your veins get the blood back up to your heart. So basically, I think that when we wear compression gear, when we sleep or after a workout or whatever, it actually keeps our muscles into a tighter, more compact space, so that nutrients don't have to go as far, so that your muscles don't have to be creating larger bridges to connect broken tissue, and it will actually help the muscles to recover faster, but they don't improve performance in the moment. So that's kind of what I have to say as far as compression gears goes. The other thing is that going on to that point that of closing the arteries to help blood get back to the heart, or closing veins rather. The thing about that is that good compression gear will be tighter around your ankles and get gradually looser as it goes up, right? So, and part of what that does is it creates this funnel that's going to cause what I call crotch drop, where it's going to ride down and you're going to have this, from here to here is where the crotch is going to end up, not actually up into your crotch. And even like higher waisted, which a lot of tights tend to be, that's going to cause it to sink down faster. So if that's something that bothers you, that annoys you, it personally does annoy me. The way that dancers do it, and I was a dancer at one point in time, you just roll up the tights so that they don't do that as much. Obviously with wrestling, that's probably going to ride back up. But just kind of pay attention and listen to your balls, because if they're getting knocked around and bumped in ways that you don't want to, then you might want to be wearing like a jock strap or a wrestling brief or something underneath your tights to kind of keep them where you want them to be kept and keep that support going. And just be mindful that you might actually lose mobility because your tights are riding lower, because as you move, they just inch themselves down a little bit. So I think that's about what I have to say when it comes to compression gear, tights, and shirts and all that. If you guys have anything to add, go ahead and put it down in the comments, make a reply video, whatever helps you guys. I hope this is helpful for you, and hopefully now you have a little bit more of what you should be looking for when you're buying them, but I can't necessarily tell you, oh yeah, this is going to be a great brand, this is going to be a lesser brand. Generally speaking, better, well-known brands are going to be better, and then the off brands, it's a bit of a crapshoot, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to find things that are in off brands that are perfectly acceptable. So I hope this is helpful, I hope that this answers your question, and we'll be back here in a moment.